So in this video, it will probably end up being a two-part series, but I wanted to look at how to avoid paralysis by analysis. Now in my mind, there are basically two versions of this. Well, I'm going to split it up. The first, and this is what this video is going to focus in on, is the short-term analysis stuff, right? Where you have to make a decision very, very quickly, almost more like maybe in an emergency type situation, and how to do that hopefully fairly quickly and efficiently and not be overwhelmed and where you just end up freezing. And then the second is more of a long-term thing where maybe you're thinking about doing something, but then you just become overwhelmed and then you never end up doing that thing. The next video will focus in on the long term. So let's get started. So as I said, this is going to focus in on the short term where you have a deadline within minutes. You have to figure something out, and where minutes and seconds may matter. One of the hardest feelings to overcome is this feeling of being overwhelmed, right? Like, am I making the right decision? Should I proceed? And sometimes it's very hard to deal with that. So let me walk you through a situation that I had, I think, maybe 8 years ago at this point. My wife and I, we were living in New York City, and the plan was after work, my wife was going to meet me at my work, and we already had train tickets to go to I think we were going to the New Jersey beach for maybe a week to meet up with our friends. It was a Friday. And because we were doing it after work, it was going to be a little bit of a tight schedule, but we thought we had plenty of time. So my wife met up with me, and the plan is we were going to take a taxi down to the train station. And the reason we were going to take a taxi is my wife had a big suitcase with her, right? Because we're going to the beach for a solid week. I tend to travel light, so I had if I recall, like a backpack on or like a suitcase backpack. But to be fair, I think I did have some of my items in this other suitcase. So we're going to try to grab a taxi. We've got about 60 minutes, which usually is more than enough time to get down to the train station from where we were. And it was raining. And if you've ever tried to grab a taxi in New York City when it's raining, it can be very difficult. And we didn't really anticipate this. And so we were spending, I think 10 minutes, 12 minutes went by. All the taxis were full. We just could not get a taxi. And this was before the time of Uber. And so at this point in time, we've only have 50 minutes, maybe 45 minutes to get to the train station. And both her and I look at each other, and you could tell we were both starting to panic. At that point, if I recall, my wife was oh my gosh, what do we do? And the wheels for me started turning. I'm like, okay, it's obvious, and traffic was getting really bad too. So I was like, all right, it's obvious we're not grabbing a taxi. If we grabbed a taxi now, I don't even know if we could make it, because as I'm looking around, traffic is just horrendous because of the rain. We need to take the subway, and we need to take the subway now. And I remember my wife kind of hesitating, not being really happy with me, because it was she was like, well, I've got this giant suitcase, and maybe if we can get a taxi in the next 7 minutes, we'll still be fine. I was like, no, we need to cut our loss. I think our best chance right now is to just take the subway. And so what about my suitcase? And so I remember just grabbing it, picking it up, and being like, I will carry it. And that was it. The decision was made. We ran for the subway, and we made it. We had, I think, 8 minutes to spare. Truth be told, I don't even know if we would have made it we may have made it with a taxi. I don't know. I didn't want to find out. But at that point in time, I had minutes to make a decision, and it was I'm confident we can make it with the subway if we catch things just right. And so it was a happy story because we ended up making it and everything was just fine. But it was one of those situations where I had to make a split decision, and I had to make it quickly. And so I want to bring up the point that at a certain point, sometimes it's better to make a quick decision and just go with it rather than doing nothing at all. So, in this situation, if my wife and I just waited and waited and waited, more than likely we would have missed our train. Now, in this particular situation, it was fairly easy to make a decision, because it's okay, traffic is bad. we can't get a taxi. I could take a bus, but because traffic is bad, bus probably isn't going to be better. I could walk, but it's a 3-mile walk. I can't make it in that time frame. The only option really left that gives us any kind of viable chance is taking the subway. And so, you know, retrospectively, like, it's a very easy decision. You have to take the subway to have the best chance. But when you're under pressure, that's when things get overwhelming. You just freeze and you're just like, I don't know what to do because I'm trying to figure this all out. I've got this big suitcase. I really don't want to lug it around in the subway, but you know, and you freeze. So just pausing and all I did in that situation was just take like a 30-second deep breath, just pausing and just be like, okay, what are my options? And then as I went through it, calmed myself. It's like, oh, the answer is obvious. Subway is the only way to go. Now, if you can visualize some of these problems before they come up, that can also help if you're in an emergency type situation. So as I record this video, my wife is away. She's in Texas on a conference, okay? I'm only down to one car. My wife's car is at the airport. So if I get into a car accident, or if my car doesn't start, I am the only one available to pick up my kids. I am isolated and it's just me. I do have some friends and neighbors that if in an extreme emergency, I'm sure they'd be more than willing to help out. But I've already thought about it. If, let's say my car doesn't start. It's like, okay, I can't walk to get my one kid, my youngest, because it's probably 4 miles. It's about 4 miles away. So that's not really a viable option. But I've already thought about it. If my car doesn't start, I'm going to grab an Uber. I've got a little car seat thing that it's portable. I can throw my youngest on. No problem. From the daycare, I'll order another Uber. I'll take it to my son's extended day program, which at that point, I would pick him up and then I would just walk home. So I've already thought about this. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, I'm not panicking. I'm not like, oh my God, what do I do? Because I've already thought of this scenario. Now, obviously, you can't think through every scenario, but, you know, the likelihood of my car not starting or me getting into a car accident is, you know, it's there. So it's not zero, but because I've thought about it beforehand, I'm not panicking. So my suggestion is anything where you can kind of think through of what you might do in certain scenarios before they actually happen, can save you a little bit of a headache. And it can also keep you calm if that situation does happen. You're prepared for it. So the last example I want to give is a situation where it's an emergency in the beginning, but then it's still like high priority, but you've got time. All right. So I was on a bike trip with a good friend of mine. I was about 4 hours away. And on the bike trip, I get a phone call from my wife. Now, she knows I'm on a bike trip and she would not call me unless it was something major. So I immediately answer the phone because I was like, okay, something's not right. Sure enough, she just informed me. She's like, hey, look, we're fine, but I smelled gas outside of our house and the gas company came. We had a major leak. And basically what happened is from the street to the house, that gas line sprung a leak. And everything was fine. The gas obviously was immediately shut off and everything was stable. But what it did mean is we didn't have any access to natural gas for our house. And so what that meant was no dryer for clothes, no cooking on the stove, no hot water. And I think that was about it that runs. Oh, and no heat because we have our furnace. So, you know, and this was in the fall. So it was like at night, it could get a little bit chilly where the furnace would kick on. So everything was stable, but there was still an urgency to like get this solved because I didn't know what was involved and how long this project was going to take to replace the gas line. I also didn't realize that we as homeowners were responsible we are responsible for everything in our house and for the gas line from the street to our house. in upstate New York, some of the propane companies, they own everything. So, and that's what I was used to growing up, because my parents have always had propane, and I'm pretty sure like the propane company owns the tanks and the lines from the tank. Like they support everything. And so I was a little bit surprised that I was responsible for this. Had no idea. I also had no idea that most homeowners get, in Pennsylvania, at least, they get insurance for these types of things, or at least that insurance exists. And so a little bit surprised. And so I was like, okay, I gotta solve this problem. And so as I'm going through it, I told my wife, I was like, hey, look, like I'm at least 6 hours away until I can get home. If you're able to, I know it's tough because you're watching the kids, you've got enough stuff going on, but if you're able to, try to call a couple of contractors and get the ball rolling on that. And I quickly looked up on my phone and I was like, hey, look, it looks like the price should be anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000. If you get a contractor and they're licensed and insured, and if they come over within the 6 hours that I'm away, if they quote you at something like, you know, $2,500 or less, just immediately go for it. Like, it's fine as long as they're licensed, and when you talk to them, as long as they seem halfway competent, that they've done these before, go with it, right? Don't waste time. Otherwise, I'm going to start preparing for what I'm considering camping mode, right? We already had a couple of space heaters, and we had electricity. So heating wasn't too much of an issue. I did immediately on Amazon order a single burner, like electric stove thing that I could just plug into an outlet. So I had the ball rolling on that. Because in my mind, I didn't know how long this was going to take, and I was preparing myself that this could be up to 2 or 3 weeks. You know, hopefully not, but I was preparing mentally that this could be a little bit of time. And part of that too is I didn't want to rush into a contractor that was going to elevate the price because this was an emergency, right? I didn't want to be extorted because of this situation. So I was willing to find a contractor that was fairly priced if it meant delaying a week or something. So that's what in my mind I had set up. So in the end, next day, I was able to get a contractor out. I think ended up being like around $2,800. It was a fair price. It was on the higher end of the fair price, but it was still within my allocated like fair price. And the advantage to this contractor is he was able to start the next day. He took care of all the paperwork. It was a very smooth process. And to me, even if I waited another week and found someone that was willing to do it for $2,000 with the same quality and everything, to me it was worth the extra $800 to have it done much, much faster. And it still took a while, right? Because they had to dig everything up. And then the gas company had to inspect it, and then before they could turn everything on. So it ended up being like a 3-day process. And so even if I waited another week before with another contractor, it may have been 10 days before I got gas hooked back up. So again, it was worth it. In the end, another contractor like quoted us like $7,500, which was at like, I kindly said, I'll think about it, but I'm thinking, oh my God, these guys are insane. And they're just gouging you for this. This is terrible. So still have to be careful out there. But again, because I wasn't in a panic mode, the advantage is that I was able to make a good quality decision. So in a situation like this, take care of the immediate issue, right? Like in this case, I want to prevent my house from exploding. So, that's an emergency, and we have to get the gas company here as quickly as possible, which they did. They were great at responding. And then once things are stabilized, set up arbitrary deadlines. So for me, I was willing to maybe go 2 weeks without gas. I was willing to prepare for that. And methodically just go through like, okay, like how long am I willing to wait? I want to get the ball rolling and just start triaging things to try to come up with a good solution. Because again, you don't want to delay things where you end up like everything becomes a how much are you willing to spend versus how long are you willing to delay the whole thing, right? Like that becomes a balancing act. And if you're trying to be super, super cheap, you may get that, but the price you may pay is you may not get gas for 3 weeks until you find the exact contractor that fits everything that you're looking to do. So again, this is how I've kind of triaged things to not be like frozen and like not make a decision, which is not great because then you delay things, but also not being overwhelmed and rushing into a decision that you regret, like in this particular case, going with that contractor that was going to charge $7,500. So, again, just trying to do your due diligence and just make sure ultimately you're happy with the decision that you've made. To sum things up, one, try to have a reasonable deadline. It might be minutes, it might be seconds, but once you get things stabilized, then come up with the next deadline. And that might, you might have the luxury of time. You might be able to delay things a little bit longer. But step one is definitely come up with some kind of deadline. Step two, try to remain calm as much as you can. It's not easy, but if you can remain calm and you can kind of take emotion out of it, and if you're lucky to have thought through, at least even cursory, of how you would handle this situation, like if you've remotely thought about it, it allows you to stay calm. So that's another suggestion is if you have thought about it, it will make you remain calm during that situation. Tip 3 or step 3, whatever you want to call this, is make quick decisions, but not so quick that you're rushing into it and regretting it. Once you've made that decision, stick with that decision. You may have to pivot a little bit, but for the most part, just be content with that decision once you've made it, and move forward. Step 4 or tip 4 is try not to be overwhelmed. Just take things one step at a time. And if you can do that in your head, like, okay, I got to do this. Next step is this. Next step is this. If you can do it methodically, it will help you keep calm and it'll help you make good decisions and not be rush into things. And ultimately, I think you'll be a lot more satisfied with the outcome, or at least that's the goal. So that's it. Hopefully, this will help you to not be, suffer from the paralysis by analysis, especially if you need to make a decision very, very quickly and triage things. And this is a look at short-term problems that may come up and how to deal with them. As I said, next video we'll look at more long-term, and that is definitely more susceptible to paralysis by analysis, because if you don't have that pressure of time, you may just sit on something and never get anything done. So, but we'll discuss that for next time. Anyway, as always, I hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.